In Unit 2A, we are going to evaluate the progressive solutions that resulted from the problems of the Gilded Age that we discussed with Unit 1. Why was progressivism necessary? First of all, there were lots of problems throughout the United States. Just to mention a few were government representation being truly of the people, women's rights, social problems, corporate abuse and labor abuse by corporations, and oversight and consumer protections. In 1900, 10 million Americans lived in poverty and could barely survive with the necessities of life. So obviously, America was in need of progress. Who were progressives? Well, progressives took on all different shapes. Both political parties had progressive components, but in general, they were civic-minded moralists who hoped to make the world a better place. Ironically, one of the areas that progressives rarely advanced were in racial relations and segregations, mostly due to the long-standing racial and ethnic prejudices that existed in the United States. Progressivism in government takes on a unique shape via the 17th Amendment and things like primaries, initiatives, referendums, and recall. In general, all of these shifted the power towards the people and away from government. As time expands, people want to have a more direct role in not only making decisions about who's on the ballot and representing their political party, but what laws are enacted, what initiatives that states want to take up, and people want to have more hands-on control. Another area is prohibition. There were various people throughout the United States that claimed a lot of the problems within cities were the homelessness, labor problems were the result of the abuse of alcohol. And so the 18th Amendment in 1917 attempts to address this situation.
In 1920, the 18th Amendment went into effect, banning the manufacture, sale, and distribution of intoxicating liquors. The Prohibition era had begun. It was the result of a long, hard-fought campaign by the Dries, as the Anti-Saloon League, the Women's Christian Temperance Union, and other prohibition advocates were known. They considered alcohol to be America's national curse, and believed a federal ban would help lower crime rates, strengthen families, and generally improve the national character. But the noble experiment, as it came to be known, would last little more than a decade. What went wrong? For one thing, Prohibition turned out to be bad for the economy. Thousands of jobs were eliminated when breweries, distilleries, and saloons were shut down. Despite grand expectations that banning alcohol would boost sales of other goods and entertainment, the result was the opposite. Restaurants couldn't make enough money without liquor sales, and theater revenues actually declined. The federal government lost valuable excise tax revenue to the tune of some $11 billion. At the same time, it spent more than $300 million to enforce the ban. And we bet you didn't know that it was never actually illegal to drink during Prohibition. The 18th Amendment bans manufacture, sale, and distribution of alcohol, not its consumption. People certainly didn't stop drinking, but they did start buying more illegal liquor. Bootleg alcohol was often of lesser quality and sometimes even dangerous. On average, 1,000 Americans died every year during Prohibition from the effects of drinking tainted liquor. And what about the idea that banning alcohol would cut down on crime? In fact, crime rates actually rose during Prohibition. In addition to gangsters like Al Capone, who made around $60 million annually from his bootleg operations, the illegal alcohol trade made criminals out of millions of formerly law-abiding Americans, including police officers or Prohibition agents tempted by lucrative bribes. By the end of the 1920s, the majority of Americans were losing patience with Prohibition. Franklin D. Roosevelt won the presidency in 1932 with a platform that pledged to end it. In 1933, the 21st Amendment repealed the ban on alcohol. It was the first time in history that a constitutional amendment had ever been repealed. Some say FDR toasted the end of Prohibition with his favorite drink, a dirty martini. A few states remained dry after the repeal, but by 1966, all of them had abandoned Prohibition, and America raised its glass to the end of the noble experiment.
The next area of progressivism that we are going to address is the problems and the progress made regarding corporations. As wealth and corporations expand in the United States, companies, small and large, and oftentimes begin abusing their workers, failing to provide safe work environments and safe opportunities for workers. One of many areas that labor reforms were needed were in safety. There were many unsafe, unsanitary working conditions, and workers often worked 12-hour days. Progressives worked hard to improve work life in some of the most dangerous jobs in the United States. In addition, child labor is going to be a specific topic. There are going to be many states that begin banning hiring children below a certain age or having special rules that apply specifically to young children who are being employed. One of the things that drew attention to this were horrible actions like the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, fire in a factory where people jumped to their death. These kinds of shocking photos and shocking stories made companies the target of these so-called progressive reforms. The attention to many of the problems in the United States at this time were brought to attention through something called muckrakers. The reality is muckrakers were basically journalists who worked to uncover scandal. The positive that came out of this is it brought attention to problems that sometimes were completely hidden in areas like food safety, labor, and taxes are going to become very important because how we pay for all these regulations and all these progressive programs are going to be through increased taxes. There were also antitrust actions, these large businesses that began to join together and hurt consumers by gouging prices or not giving consumers enough choice. These were broken up by things like the Federal Trade Commission or the Clayton Antitrust Act. Another area of progressivism was women's rights. There was a disagreement whether women's rights included only the right to vote or also marital rights, property rights, and different groups focused on different things. But in general, women in the West saw rights before women in other parts of the country. If you notice this map, you can see that out west adopt women's suffrage laws much earlier than the rest of the country. And if you think back to our lesson on westward expansion, life in the West was hard and women were treated much more equally because their lifestyle lended itself to an all-hands-on-deck mentality. Finally, the 19th Amendment is passed and women are going to officially get the right to vote in the U.S. Constitution.